April 14th, 1945, 2:15 in the afternoon, Central Germany. The Jeep stopped 50 yards from the gate. General George S. Patton sat in the passenger seat. His hand gripped the door frame. His knuckles were white. He didn't move. Captain Thornton Caldwell stood beside the vehicle. He was 29 years old. He had served under Patton for 8 months. He had seen the general charge enemy positions under artillery fire. He had watched him stand unmoved as German 88s screamed overhead. He had witnessed Patton walk through minefields to inspect forward positions, but he had never seen Patton hesitate. Not until now. The wind changed direction. The smell hit them like an invisible wall. It wasn't the smell of recent death. Caldwell knew that smell. He had smelled it at Normandy when the bodies floated in the surf, at Bastogne when frozen corpses littered the snow. This was different. This was old death. Stale, heavy, sweet, and rotten at the same time. It had layers: decay, burning, disease. It stuck to the back of your throat. It made your stomach turn. It made you want to run. Patton finally spoke. "What is that?" His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Caldwell had heard the general bellow orders that carried across battlefields, had heard him curse so loud it made sergeants blush. But this voice was different. This was the voice of a man confronting something beyond his comprehension. Caldwell didn't answer. He didn't have words for it. The general climbed out of the Jeep slowly. His ivory-handled pistols gleamed in the afternoon sun. His 4 stars glinted on his helmet. His riding boots were polished to a mirror shine. His uniform was immaculate. George S. Patton looked like he was ready for a parade, for a victory celebration, for photographers and newsreel cameras. But his hand trembled. Just slightly. Just enough that Caldwell noticed. The general's right hand shook as he adjusted his belt. Then he caught himself, made a fist, forced control. But for a moment the mask had slipped. Patton walked toward the gate. Each step was deliberate, measured, like a man walking to his own execution, or a man walking towards something he knew would change him forever. The iron gate stood open. Above it, words were welded into the metal. Jedem das Sein, to each his own. Caldwell had learned enough German to understand. A Nazi joke, a cruel one. Everyone gets what they deserve. The prisoners deserve this. The murdered deserve their fate. The thought made him sick. Caldwell moved to follow. Patton raised his hand. "Stay here, Captain. Sir General Eisenhower specifically said you shouldn't." Patton turned. His face was stone. His blue eyes were hard. "Ike's not here, I am." There was finality in those words. No argument, no discussion. He walked through the gate alone. Caldwell stood at attention. He watched his commanding officer disappear into Buchenwald concentration camp. He counted the seconds. 30, 60, 90. At 2 minutes he heard it. Not a shout, not a cry, just a sound. A low, guttural sound, like an animal in pain, like something primal and broken. Caldwell moved out without thinking. He ran through the gate, past the guard towers that had held SS men with machine guns, past the barbed wire that still crackled with residual voltage, into the main courtyard. He stopped. His brain couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. There were bodies, a pile of them, more than 100, maybe 150. It was hard to count because they were tangled together. Naked, emaciated, yellow skin stretched so tight over bones you could see every rib, every vertebra, every joint. Arms and legs intertwined in death's final embrace. Mouths frozen open in silent screams. Or maybe they had been screaming for help that never came. Eyes staring at nothing, at everything, accusing the sky itself. Some were fresh, dead within hours, maybe a day. Their skins still retained some color, some moisture, some hint of the humanity they had possessed. Others were older, mummified by time and neglect. Leather stretched over skeleton. Faces collapsed inward, bodies that weighed less than children. The pile was 6 feet high, carefully stacked, efficiently arranged, like cordwood, like supplies waiting to be processed. And beside the pile, General George S. Patton was on his knees. The warrior, the legend, the man who called himself Old Blood and Guts, the general who had slapped soldiers for cowardice, who had driven armies across Europe faster than anyone thought possible, who had broken through German lines that were supposed to be impregnable. He was on his knees like a penitent before an altar. Caldwell had served in combat for 3 years. He thought he had seen everything war could offer: the horror of Omaha Beach, the frozen hell of the Bulge, the desperation of men fighting and dying in mud and blood. but he had never seen this. He had never seen death on an industrial scale. Death as a factory process. Death as policy. Death as bureaucracy. This wasn't war. War had rules. War had purpose. War had, at least in theory, some connection to honor or necessity or survival. This was something else entirely. Patton stood up slowly, like an old man, like someone who had aged decades in minutes. His face was gray. Ashen, the color of the bodies on the pile. He turned away from the corpses. He walked 20 feet. His gait was unsteady, uncertain. Then he bent over and vomited. The general who had never shown weakness, who had ridden horses into battle in the Great War, who had fought Pancho Villa, who had commanded tanks when tanks were new and untested, who had built a reputation on iron discipline and unshakable will. He was vomiting like a sick child. His body convulsed once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed across the empty courtyard. When it was over, he straightened slowly. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at Caldwell. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red. "Captain, sir, you will never speak of this to anyone, ever. Do you understand me?" His voice was steady now, command voice, general voice, but there was something underneath, something that sounded like shame, or fear, or both. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now get me a phone. I need to call Eisenhower." Patton walked past him. His gait was steady now, military bearing restored, back straight, shoulders back. The mask was back in place. But Caldwell noticed something, the general's right hand. The fingers wouldn't stop moving, opening and closing. A tell, an unconscious revelation of inner turmoil. Patton tucked it into his belt to hide it, but Caldwell had seen. They walked deeper into the camp. The prisoners watched them, thousands of them, living skeletons in striped uniforms that hung on their frames like tents. They stood behind barbed wire, behind fences that divided the camp into sections, into zones of suffering. They didn't shout, they didn't wave, they didn't beg, they just stared, silent. Their eyes were dead, past hope, past despair, past anger, past everything human. They had seen too much, endured too much, lost too much. They were alive, technically, biologically, but in every other way that mattered, they were already ghosts. Caldwell felt their gaze on him. It was worse than enemy fire. At least in combat, men tried to kill you quickly. There was a certain honesty to it, a directness. This was something else. This was death drawn out, methodical, bureaucratic. This was suffering as a science. He wanted to look away. Every instinct screamed at him to turn his head, to close his eyes, to run back through the gate and never return. But he forced himself to keep looking, to bear witness. Because if he couldn't even look, what right did he have to call himself a soldier? They passed the barracks. Long wooden buildings that stretched in rows. They stank of disease and unwashed bodies and human waste and despair. The smell was so strong it was almost visible, a miasma that hung in the air like fog. Patton stopped at one barrack. He looked inside. Caldwell followed his gaze. Men lay on wooden shelves, not beds, not bunks. Shelves, 3 high, 4 across, packed together like merchandise in a warehouse. They weren't sleeping. Some were too weak to move. Their eyes tracked the Americans, but their bodies remained still. Others were already dead. No one had removed them yet. The living and the dead occupied the same space, shared the same air, existed in the same hell. A man on the bottom shelf reached out a skeletal hand. He said something in a language Caldwell didn't understand. Polish maybe, or Russian, or Yiddish. The man's eyes were pleading, begging for something, help, water, death, anything. Patton's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. He stared at the man for 5 seconds. Then he turned away. "Keep moving, Captain." His voice was harsh, angry, but Caldwell understood. The anger wasn't at the prisoner. It was at everything else. At the SS, at the Nazis, at the Germans who let this happen, at the world that allowed it, at himself for not getting here sooner. They moved on. They reached a section where children had been held. Not many. Most children didn't survive long enough to be held, but there were a few. Caldwell saw a boy who looked about 10. He was bald, probably from typhus or starvation or both. His striped uniform was so large it looked like he was wearing a tent. His eyes were ancient, old, as if he had lived 100 years in his decade of life. The boy stared at Patton, not with hope, not with fear, just stared. like the boy was trying to understand what Patton was. This man in the clean uniform with the stars and the polished boots. This man from outside, from the world that had forgotten them. Patton stopped. He looked at the boy. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Patton reached into his pocket. He pulled out a chocolate bar, army ration. He walked to the fence. He held it out through the wire. The boy didn't move. He just stared. "Take it," Patton said. His voice was gentle, almost pleading. The boy still didn't move. Maybe he didn't understand English. Maybe he didn't believe it was real. Maybe he was past accepting kindness. Patton set the chocolate bar on the ground by the fence. He stepped back. The boy's hands shot out, lightning fast. He grabbed the chocolate and retreated into the crowd of prisoners. Disappeared, like a ghost. Patton stood there, staring at the spot where the boy had been. "Sir," Caldwell said quietly, "we should keep moving." Patton nodded, but he didn't move for another 10 seconds. When he finally turned away, his face was different. Harder, colder, more determined. Something had crystallized in those seconds. Some decision had been made. They reached the crematorium. The building was brick, industrial, functional. There was a tall chimney. Black soot stained the walls around it. The doors were open. Inside, Caldwell could see ovens, large enough for bodies, multiple bodies at once. The smell here was overwhelming. Different from the smell at the entrance. More concentrated, more specific. Burned flesh, charred bone, the sweet, nauseating stench of rendered fat, ancient smoke that had soaked into the walls over years of continuous operation. Caldwell stopped at the door. He couldn't go in. His body refused. Some primal part of his brain was screaming danger, warning him that entering that building would break something inside him that could never be repaired. Patton walked inside without hesitation. The general disappeared into the crematorium. Caldwell counted. 30 seconds. 60, 90, 120. When Patton emerged 2 minutes later, his face had changed again. The gray pallor was gone. In its place was something else. Something Caldwell had never seen in those ice-blue eyes. Pure rage. Not the hot anger of combat, not the explosive fury when incompetent officers failed to follow orders. This was cold, calculated, deadly. This was the rage of a man who had seen something so fundamentally evil that it changed the chemistry of his soul. Patton pointed toward the town in the distance. Weimar, beautiful Weimar, the city of Goethe and Schiller, the cultural capital of Germany, the cradle of German humanism and philosophy. You could see the church spires rising elegant and proud, the red roofs of prosperous houses, the tree-lined streets where poets had walked and dreamed. 5 miles away, it's the crow flies, close enough to see, close enough to smell. "They knew," Patton said. His voice was quiet, that cold whisper again, more terrifying than any shout. "Sir, the people in that town, they knew. They claim they didn't, sir. They say the smoke was from a factory. They say they never saw. They're lying." Patton turned to face him. "Captain, you can smell this place from a mile away. I smelled it 50 yards from the gate. You can see the smoke from 5 miles. The ashes fell on their gardens, on their roofs, on their children's hair. The prisoners worked their railroads, walked through their streets, and they want us to believe they didn't know." He slammed his riding crop against his boot. The crack echoed across the courtyard like a gunshot. "They knew. They also they smelled, and they did nothing." "Sir, maybe they were afraid." "The SS would have." "Afraid," Patton's voice rose. "Afraid, Captain. Fear is not knowing if you'll survive the next artillery barrage. Fear is watching your friends die and wondering if you're next. Fear is jumping out of an airplane into enemy fire." He gestured at the camp. This isn't about fear. This is about convenience, about comfort, about not wanting to see what was right in front of their faces because acknowledging it would require them to do something. He turned back toward Weimar, stared at it with such intensity that Caldwell half expected the city to burst into flames. "Get me that phone. Now." But before they left the courtyard, Patton saw something else. A man, a prisoner, standing by himself near the fence. He was older than most, maybe 50, maybe 30. It was impossible to tell. Starvation aged you, made determination of age meaningless. The man was staring at Patton, not with the dead eyes of the others. His eyes were alive, burning with something, intelligence, recognition, understanding. Patton walked toward him. Caldwell followed. The man spoke in English, accented but clear. American. Yes, Patton said. You are General. I am. The man nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. I was professor. Mathematics. University of Berlin. My name is... He stopped, shook his head. My name does not matter anymore. They took my name when they took everything else. What do you want me to know? Patton asked. The question surprised Caldwell. Patton had intuited that this man wanted something, needed to say something. The professor leaned closer to the fence. The people in Weimar, they ask me questions. When we work on railroad, when we march through streets, they ask, are you fed well? Are you treated well? And they smile, as if they are concerned, as if they care. He laughed. It was a terrible sound, like bones rattling. They do not want to know truth. They want to be told lies. They want us to say, yes, we are fine, so they can sleep at night, so they can go to their opera and their cafes and tell themselves they are civilized. The professor's eyes locked on Patton's. You must make them see, not just see bodies. They must understand. They must know they are complicit. Everyone, every person who saw and did nothing. Make them understand. Patton was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I will. Good on, the professor said. He stepped back from the fence. That is all I wanted. To know someone will make them face truth. He walked away, disappeared into the crowd of prisoners. Patton watched him go. Then he turned to Caldwell. Get me that phone, Captain, and get me a list of everyone in Weimar, everyone who matters, everyone who claims to be educated and civilized and cultured. Sir, what are you up them? Just do it. 30 minutes later, Patton sat in a commandeered office, probably an SS officer's office. The furnishings were good, the desk was mahogany. There were still pictures on the wall, pictures of Hitler, of Himmler, propaganda posters about racial purity and strength through discipline. Caldwell wanted to rip them down, to burn them, but there wasn't time. A field telephone sat on the desk. Patton stared at it for a moment before picking it up. He waited while the operator connected the line. Secure channel, encrypted, direct to Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. To Eisenhower. Caldwell stood by the door. He watched Patton light a cigarette. The general's hands were controlled now, steady. Whatever weakness he had shown at the body pile was locked away, buried under layers of will and discipline and military bearing. But Caldwell knew better. He had seen behind the mask. George S. Patton was human after all, and what he had seen today had wounded him in ways that no German bullet ever could. The phone crackled. A voice came through. George Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander. The man who had managed to keep the Allied coalition together despite impossible political pressures. The man who balanced Montgomery's ego and de Gaulle's pride and Churchill's demands and Roosevelt's vision. The man who held Patton's career and life in his hands. Ike, I'm at Buchenwald. Silence on the other end, a long silence. Then carefully, I told you not to visit camps personally. We have people for that. Intelligence officers, medical personnel. You're too valuable to hell with what you told me. You need to see this. George, please listen. I'm in the middle of a situation here. Montgomery is demanding we slow the advance so the British can catch up. He's threatening to go to Churchill. Churchill is on my back about letting the Russians reach Berlin first. The president wants updates every 6 hours. I don't have time for... Shut up and listen. Caldwell's eyes widened. No one talked to Eisenhower like that. No one except Patton. And even Patton usually had the sense to be more diplomatic. But today was not a day for diplomacy. George, I understand you're upset, but you cannot speak to me like, Ike, shut up and listen to what I'm about to tell you. The line went silent. Patton drew on his cigarette, exhaled slowly. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter, more controlled, but with an intensity that made Caldwell's skin crawl. Ike, I've been a soldier for 35 years. I've fought in Mexico against Valle. I've fought in France in the Great War. I've seen men die in every way possible. I watched them drown in mud at Verdun. I've seen them burned alive in tanks. I've seen them blown apart by artillery. I've seen them freeze to death in winter. I thought I understood what war was. I thought I had seen the worst that human beings could do to each other. He paused, took another drag on the cigarette. I was wrong. George, what are you talking about? This isn't war. War has rules. War has some kind of logic. Even when it's brutal, even when it's terrible, there's a reason. Territory, resources, Survival. But this, Patton's voice dropped even lower. This is madness. This is evil, or a calculated industrial evil. This is murder as policy, death as bureaucracy, suffering as science. He stood up. The phone cord stretched taut. There are 20,000 prisoners still alive here. Alive, Ike, barely. Most of them won't survive another month even with our care. God knows how many died. The ovens ran for 8 years. 8 years. Do the math, Ike. Tens of thousands. Maybe hundreds of thousands. Just at this one camp. My God, Eisenhower breathed. And 5 miles away, the good citizens of Weimar are hanging their laundry and going to work and acting like nothing happened. Like they don't know. Like they never saw anything. The Germans always claim they didn't know, George. That's standard. They're lying. The smoke blew over their city for 8 years. The explosion came. Caldwell had been waiting for it. Patton's legendary temper unleashed. The ashes fell on their gardens. Their children breathed it. The prisoners walked through their streets every day. They shopped next to SS officers. They went to concerts and cafes and churches while people burned 1 mile away. George, please? And you know what the worst part is, Ike? They don't even feel guilty. They feel inconvenienced. Inconvenienced that we're here, that we're asking questions, that we're disturbing their comfortable lives. Patton sat back down. His hands were shaking again. He gripped the edge of the desk to steady them. So no, Ike, I don't care about Montgomery's hurt feelings. I don't care about Churchill's political calculations. I don't care about keeping the coalition happy. Because fuck the coalition if this is what it protected. George, I'm going to educate them. Eisenhower's voice changed, became sharp, wary. What does that mean? It means tomorrow morning I'm going to round up 1,000 of Weimar's finest citizens. The rich ones, the educated ones, the professors and lawyers and doctors and businessmen's wives. The ones who went to university and read philosophy and think they're the pinnacle of Western civilization. The ones who claim they're too cultured, too educated, too sophisticated to have known about this. Patton's voice was cold as ice now. And I'm going to march them up here, 5 miles, on foot. I'm going to walk them through this camp. I'm going to show them the bodies, the ovens, the medical experiments, everything. And I'm going to rub their noses in the raw sewage of their own history. Silence. Long silence. Caldwell held his breath. This was unprecedented. Forcing civilians to tour a concentration camp without authorization, without approval from Schaeff, without coordination with the other allies. Patton was about to do something that could end his career, that could result in court-martial, that could destroy everything he had built, but he was going to do it anyway. Eisenhower's voice came through slowly, carefully, each word measured. George, that's not standard procedure. Schaeff hasn't authorized any. I don't give a damn about Schaeff procedures. George, please listen to me. No, you listen to me for once. Those procedures didn't stop this. Those procedures let this happen while we worried about offending German sensibilities, while we coordinated with allies who wanted to go slow and be careful and not upset anyone. Patton leaned forward, gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. Ike, in 50 years, people are going to say this never happened. They're going to call it propaganda, allied exaggeration. They're going to say we made it up to justify the war, to demonize Germany, to excuse our own actions. That's ridiculous. We have evidence. We have photographs. We have... Evidence can be dismissed. Photographs can be faked. Our testimony can be called biased. But German witnesses, Germans who saw with their own eyes, who admitted their knowledge, who confessed their complicity, that's different. Patton's voice became urgent, pleading almost. Unless we make the Germans themselves bear witness, unless we force them to see and document their reactions, unless we create German evidence from German mouths, then 50 years from now, this becomes a myth, a story, something people doubt. It's not us saying 6 million died. It's them, their own people, their own witnesses. That's the only way this survives history. Eisenhower didn't respond immediately. Caldwell could almost hear him thinking, weighing, calculating. The Supreme Commander was a political general. He had to be. Coalition warfare required compromise, required diplomacy, required keeping everyone happy. But sometimes keeping everyone happy was impossible. Finally, Eisenhower spoke. Montgomery will be furious. Fuck Montgomery. The British will protest formally. Let them. Churchill will call the president, so let him call. If this goes wrong, George, if you misjudge this, if the Germans react badly, or if the press portrays this as American brutality, I cannot protect you. Do you understand I will not be able to save your career? Patton smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had already made his peace with consequences. If I'm wrong about this, like if making Germans witness their own atrocities is the wrong call, then I deserve to be cashiered. I deserve to be court-martialed. I deserve to lose everything. But I'm not wrong. You know I'm not. Your gut is telling you the same thing mine is. This needs to be done. And it needs to be done now before they have time to construct their lies, before they have time to rehearse their ignorance. Another pause, longer this time. Caldwell could hear the faint sounds of the SHAEF headquarters through the phone. Typewriters, voices, the machinery of war and administration. Then Eisenhower's voice, quiet, resigned, but firm. Do it, but do it right. Document everything. Bring cameras, bring reporters, military and civilian. If we're going to do this, if we're going to break every protocol, we do it for history. We make sure the record is complete and indisputable. Thank you, Ike. Don't thank me yet. If this backfires, we both go down. Clear. Crystal clear. And George, yes. I'm trusting your instincts on this, your moral compass. Don't let me down. I won't. The line went dead. Patton set the phone down gently. He sat back in the chair, exhaled slowly. Then he looked at Caldwell. Captain, you heard the man. We document everything. Get me photographers from Army Signal Corps. Get me combat cameramen. And get me reporters. I want the press there. I want newspapers. I want newsreels. I want this recorded from every angle. Yes, sir. And Captain, get me a list of Weimar's richest citizens, their addresses, their professions, their social standing. I want to know who they are before we knock on their doors. How many, sir? 1,000. Caldwell blinked. Sir, that's a significant number. The logistics of moving 1,000 civilians? 1,000. No more, no less. I want it to be significant. I want it to be news. I want people to remember this moment. Patton stood, walked to the window, looked out at Buchenwald, at the barracks and the barbed wire and the chimney still stained with soot. The cream of the crop, Captain. Professors, lawyers, doctors, businessmen, politicians' wives, museum directors, orchestra conductors, the cultural elite, the ones who went to the opera while smoke blew through their windows. Those are the ones I want. Yes, sir. When do we conduct the roundup? Tomorrow morning, 0600, we move house to house. By 0800, they march. Caldwell saluted, turned to leave. Captain. Sir, Patton was still staring out the window. At Weimar in the distance. Beautiful, prosperous, cultured Weimar. They say they didn't know. Wir haben es nicht gewusst. We knew nothing. He turned. His blue eyes were hard as flint, cold as ice, deadly as a drawn blade. I'm going to shove the truth down their throats, and I'm going to make sure they choke on it. That evening, Patton sat alone in his quarters. The room was sparse, a cot with a thin mattress, a wooden desk scarred from years of military use, a folding chair. The walls were bare except for a map of Germany marked with red arrows showing Third Army's advance and blue circles marking captured cities. There were a lot of blue circles, more than anyone had thought possible. Patton had driven his tanks faster and farther than military doctrine said was feasible. He had relieved Bastogne in winter when everyone said it couldn't be done. He had crossed the Rhine in days when the planners had estimated weeks. He had broken German lines that were supposed to be impregnable. He was winning the war. But tonight, victory felt hollow. What good was winning if this was what you discovered when you won? He opened his diary, a leather-bound book he had kept since 1917, 28 years of war and peace, of battles and politics, of triumphs and failures. Every night without fail he wrote, sometimes about tactics and strategy, sometimes about the men under his command, sometimes about things he could never say aloud. Tonight he wrote about Buchenwald. His handwriting was neat, controlled, military precision, each letter formed carefully. But the pen moved slower than usual. He had to pause several times, had to gather himself before continuing. April 14th, 1945. I have never felt so sick in my life. Not in Mexico, not in France, not in any battle I have fought. This is not war. This is madness. This is evil that I lack words to adequately describe. He stopped, stared at the page, continued. I made myself walk through the entire camp. I made myself look at the bodies, at the ovens, at the survivors who are more dead than alive. If I am going to force others to witness this, I must witness it fully myself. I cannot ask of them what I am unwilling to do. Another pause. The pen hovered over the paper. I vomited in front of my aide. After 35 years as a soldier, I lost control of my stomach like a raw recruit seeing his first dead body. Captain Caldwell was professional enough not to comment, but he saw, he knows. There is no hiding weakness from the men you serve with. Patton set the pen down, lit a cigarette, smoked half of it before picking the pen back up. But perhaps that weakness is appropriate. Perhaps this should make us sick. Perhaps vomiting is the only sane response to insanity. Perhaps the day we can look at this without horror is the day we lose our humanity entirely. He closed the diary, set it aside. Outside night had fallen over Germany. Through the window he could see Weimar in the distance. The city was dark. Blackout conditions still technically in effect, though the war was effectively over in this sector. But he knew it was there, sleeping, peaceful, innocent, innocent. That word again, that lie. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Caldwell stepped in. He carried a manila folder thick with papers. Sir, the list is ready. 1,000 names. Prioritized by wealth and social standing as you requested. Patton took the folder. He opened it, scanned the first page. Dr. Wilhelm Schneider, professor of philosophy, University of Weimar, age 52, specialization ethics and moral philosophy. Publications include The Categorical Imperative in Modern Society and Kant's Vision of Human Dignity. Patton almost laughed. A professor of ethics, living 1 mile from an extermination camp. The irony was so sharp it hurt. Frau Margareta Klein, wife of Burgermeister Klaus Klein, age 45, president of Weimar Cultural Society, organizer of annual Goethe Festival, patron of Weimar Symphony Orchestra, and so on. 1,000 names, 1,000 lives, 1,000 people who would never be the same after tomorrow. Lawyers who practiced law while law was perverted. Doctors who healed some while others were experimented upon. Teachers who educated children while children died. Businessmen who profited while slave labor built their wealth. Any problems anticipated with the roundup? No, sir, the MPs are fully briefed. We'll move at 0600, house to house, street by street. We anticipate some resistance. Some will claim medical exemptions. Some will refuse, but nothing we can't handle. Good. Use minimum necessary force. I don't want them hurt. I want them aware. I want them present. I want them to see. Yes, sir. Caldwell hesitated. Sir, about the cameras. Yes. Army Signal Corps is sending 2 teams. We'll have combat photographers as well. But, sir, I took the liberty of contacting the Civilian Press Corps. There will be journalists present. Reuters, Associated Press, United Press, Time Magazine, Life Magazine. Patton looked up sharply. I didn't authorize that. No, sir, but General Eisenhower did. He called 30 minutes ago. He wants maximum documentation. He wants the world to see this. He's even sending his own representative. Who? He's coming himself, sir. Tomorrow afternoon, after the tour. He wants to see what they see. He wants to walk where they walk. Patton leaned back in his chair. Process this information. Ike was coming. That meant this was real. This was official. This was no longer just Patton's crusade. This was now Supreme Headquarters policy. This was now the official position of the Allied Command. The weight of that settled on him. Heavy, permanent. Captain, do you think I'm doing the right thing? Caldwell was surprised by the question. Generals didn't ask captains for validation, especially not Patton, the man who projected absolute confidence at all times, who never second-guessed himself publicly, who made decisions and lived with them. But here in the privacy of his quarters, he was asking, Sir, I'm not sure what right means anymore, not after today. Honest answer. I appreciate that. Patton stood, walked to the window, stared out at the darkness, at Weimar invisible in the night but present nonetheless. Tomorrow we're going to destroy 1,000 people's illusions, their comfortable lies, their carefully constructed ignorance, their defense mechanisms that let them sleep at night. He turned to face Caldwell. Some of them won't survive it, not emotionally, not physically. They'll kill themselves rather than face what they allowed, rather than own their complicity. His voice dropped. Am I a liberator or am I a monster? Am I bringing justice or am I inflicting cruelty? Caldwell chose his words carefully. Sir, you're a soldier doing his duty. You're making sure this never happens again. You're creating a record that can't be denied. That's not monstrous. That's necessary. He searched for the right word. That's moral. Moral. Patton tasted the word, considered it. Yes, perhaps it is. Moral but not easy. Necessary but not pleasant. Right but not comfortable. He moved to his desk, pulled out a bottle of whiskey from the bottom drawer. Good whiskey. Pre-war. Scottish. He'd been saving it for victory, for the end of the war. But the end of the war felt very far away tonight, despite the German surrender that was surely coming soon. Despite the battles won and territory taken. The war wouldn't truly end until people understood what had been fought against, what had been stopped, what had been revealed. He poured 2 glasses, handed one to Caldwell. To necessary evil, Captain, may we have the strength to commit it when we must. They drank. The whiskey burned going down, but not as much as the memory of what they had seen. Nothing could burn away that. Patton set his glass down. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be the longest day of your life. Yes, sir. Caldwell saluted, turned to leave. Captain? Sir, thank you for being here, for seeing what needed to be seen, for not turning away. Sir, I dismissed. Caldwell left, closed the door quietly behind him. Patton was alone again. He didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the bodies. The skeletons, the boy with the ancient eyes. The professor who begged him to make them understand. Instead, he sat at his desk and planned. Routes, timing, security, logistics. He planned the way he planned a military campaign. With precision, with attention to detail. With contingencies for every possibility. Because that's what this was, a campaign. Not against the enemy, not against the Germans. Against forgetting, against denial, against the human capacity to look away from uncomfortable truth. At midnight, the phone rang. Patton picked it up. Patton? George, it's Ike. The Supreme Commander's voice was different now. Softer, more intimate. The voice of a friend, not a superior officer. I know what you're doing tomorrow, George. I know it goes against every regulation in the book. I know Montgomery is going to raise hell. I know Churchill is going to be concerned about optics and politics and post-war relations with Germany. Patton waited. But you're right. You're absolutely right. And I should have said that earlier instead of worrying about coalition politics. Eisenhower paused. When he spoke again, his voice was even quieter. More personal. I've been jealous of you, George. What? Of your instincts, your moral clarity. You see things I don't see. You understand what matters before I do. You make decisions in 30 seconds that are better than mine after 30 hours of deliberation and consultation and political calculation. Patton didn't know what to say. Eisenhower never talked like this, never admitted weakness or doubt or envy. Tomorrow you're going to do something I don't have the courage to do. You're going to force people to face truth, hard truth, uncomfortable truth, truth that will break some of them. And you'll carry that weight. You'll remember their faces. You'll bear the responsibility. He paused. I couldn't do it. I would worry too much about the politics, about the consequences, about my career. But you don't care about those things, not when something more important is at stake. That's why you're you, George. That's why you're irreplaceable. The line crackled with static. Somewhere in the background, Patton could hear voices. The machinery of Schaeff continuing even at midnight. Ike, don't, just listen. Tomorrow, whatever happens, I will support you. Montgomery can complain. Churchill can call the president. The press can write whatever they want. I will stand behind your decision. Because it's the right decision. And sometimes being right matters more than being popular. Patton felt something in his chest, gratitude, relief, validation. Thank you. No, thank you for having the courage I lack, for doing what needs to be done, for being willing to carry the weight that I can't. Eisenhower's voice strengthened, became more formal, more like the Supreme Commander again. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow you make history. Make sure it's history we can be proud of. The phone went dead. Patton sat in the darkness. Outside, Weimar slept. Innocent, ignorant, comfortable. Not for long. He picked up his pen one final time, opened his diary, wrote one last entry for the day. Some things must be seen to be believed, and believed to be prevented. Tomorrow I make them see. God grant me the strength to do what must be done. and God grant them the strength to survive the seeing. He closed the book. Tomorrow, 1,000 people would walk into hell, and he would be the one who forced them through the gate. It was, he thought, the most important thing he had ever done. More important than any battle. More important than any victory. Because this wasn't about winning. This was about remembering, about creating witnesses, about ensuring that 50 years from now, 100 years from now, people would know what happened here. And they would know because Germans themselves testified to it. Because the perpetrators' neighbors admitted what they saw. Because the people who claimed ignorance were forced to confess their knowledge. That was worth everything. Worth his career. Worth his reputation. Worth whatever came after. He extinguished the light, sat in darkness, waited for dawn, the longest night of his life, for the longest day. Tomorrow Weimar would learn the truth, and the truth would destroy them, as it should. April 16th, 1945, 6 o'clock in the morning. The sun rose over Weimar like it rose over every other German city, indifferent, neutral, unconcerned with the affairs of men. But this morning would be different. Captain Thornton Caldwell stood in the town square. Around him 30 vehicles, 60 soldiers, MPs mostly. Young men with hard faces who had seen enough of war to understand what was coming, what they were about to do. Caldwell had briefed them at 5:30, while most of Weimar still slept. Gentlemen, we are executing Operation Witness. Not an official designation, General Patton's name for it, but it's as official as anything we've done. He held up a clipboard, lists, addresses, names. We will proceed to addresses on this list. We will inform the occupants that they are required to attend a tour this morning. They will comply. They will come voluntarily or they will come by force, but they will come. A sergeant raised his hand, young, maybe 22. He had been at Normandy, at Bastogne. He had earned his stripes in blood. Sir, what if they ask why? Tell them General Patton has invited them to see something important. And if they demand more information, tell them they'll find out when they get there. Another hand, a corporal this time, older, 30 at least. Sir, what if they refuse? What if they claim medical conditions, pregnancy, disability? Use your judgment. Genuine medical emergencies, we make exceptions. But general resistance, general claims of inconvenience or importance. Caldwell's voice hardened. Minimum necessary force. We're not here to hurt them. We're here to ensure they come. Clear, clear, sir. The vehicles moved out. Caldwell rode in the lead jeep. They drove through Weimar's streets. The city was waking up. Smoke rose from chimneys as people started their morning fires. A few early risers walked to work. A baker opened his shop. Life continuing as if yesterday hadn't happened. As if 5 miles away, bodies weren't piled like cordwood. The normalcy was obscene. First address, villa on the west side of the city. Large, expensive. 3 stories of stone and timber. Immaculate gardens even in April. Roses would bloom here in a month. Life and beauty carefully cultivated. Home of Dr. Wilhelm Schneider. Caldwell knocked on the heavy wooden door. Solid oak, carved with intricate patterns. The kind of door that announced wealth and education and culture. A woman answered, middle-aged, well-dressed even this early. The maid, or perhaps the housekeeper. The kind of servant only the wealthy could afford. Is Dr. Schneider home? Yeah, but he is not receiving visitors at this hour. Perhaps if you return after 9. Caldwell pushed past her gently but firmly. 2 MPs followed. Their boots echoed on the marble floor. Marble, in a private home, while people starved 5 miles away. This is highly irregular, the woman protested. You cannot simply... Where is he? She pointed upstairs, trembling now, understanding that this was not a social call. They found Schneider in his study, a room lined floor to ceiling with books. Thousands of them. Philosophy, ethics, literature, the accumulated wisdom of Western civilization carefully cataloged and displayed. He sat at his desk, wearing a silk robe, burgundy, expensive. He was drinking coffee from a porcelain cup, reading a book, Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. The spine was worn, well-read, well-loved. He looked up, annoyed, as if they were interrupting something important. Was this us? What is the meaning of this intrusion? Caldwell stood at attention. Military protocol, respectful despite everything. Schneider, I am Captain Thornton Caldwell, United States Army. General Patton requests your presence for a tour this morning. Request, Schneider set his book down carefully, marking the page. as if he expected to return to it later, as if today was just an inconvenience to be endured. I don't take requests from occupiers. This is my home. You have no authority here. Actually, sir, under military occupation law, I am a professor of philosophy, a scholar. I have nothing to do with military matters. I oppose the war. I never joined the party. I have always advocated for peace and human dignity. I demand you leave my house immediately. Caldwell nodded to the MPs. They stepped forward. Schneider saw the weapons, M1 carbines, not pointed at him, but present, visible, undeniable. His face changed. The annoyance became something else. Fear, understanding. This is barbaric. This violates the Geneva Convention. You cannot force civilians to. The Geneva Convention covers prisoners of war, sir. You're not a prisoner. You're a guest. General Patton insists on your attendance. Caldwell's voice was flat, professional, no emotion, just facts. You have 5 minutes to dress, warm clothes, walking shoes. We're going on a tour. I refuse. I absolutely refuse. I will contact the Swiss embassy. I will file a formal protest with. The MPs moved closer, not threatening, just present. Schneider understood. He stood, moved toward his bedroom. 5 minutes, but I am doing this under protest. This will be reported. Yes, sir, 5 minutes. While they waited, Caldwell looked around the study, at the books, at the desk with its expensive fountain pen and leather blotter, at a photograph on the wall, Schneider shaking hands with someone important, receiving an award, the Distinguished Service Cross for Philosophy, or some such thing, a scholar, a teacher, a man who built his life around ideas of human dignity and moral reasoning, living 1 mile from hell. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Second address, the Klein residence, even larger than Schneider's. The Burgermeister's mansion, 4 stories, gardens that took up half a city block, a fountain in the courtyard. Not running now, but clearly maintained. This was power. This was privilege. This was the visible manifestation of authority. Caldwell knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Louder. Still nothing. An MP tried by a door. Unlocked. Unusual. The wealthy usually lock their doors. Unless they entered. The house was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses on your ears. Search the house, Caldwell ordered quietly. They found her in the sitting room. Frau Margarete Klein sat in an ornate chair, Louis XIV style, gold leaf, velvet upholstery. She was dressed in a fur coat despite the warming spring weather. Full makeup, carefully applied. Jewelry, diamonds at her throat, pearls at her wrists. She was dressed for an occasion. But she was staring at nothing, at the wall, at space. Her eyes were open but unseeing. Frau Klein, no response. Caldwell approached carefully. Ma'am, are you all right? She turned to look at him slowly, as if waking from a dream or a nightmare. Her eyes were red, swollen. She had been crying. Recently. The makeup couldn't quite hide it. My husband is dead. Her voice was flat, empty, as if all emotion had been drained from it. I'm sorry, ma'am. I wasn't aware. Last night, he received orders yesterday from your people to provide a list of citizens, names, addresses, social standing. He understood what it meant, what you were planning. She laughed. It was a terrible sound, like glass breaking. He knew what you would find at the camp. He knew I would be forced to see it, so he. Her voice broke. He took cyanide, poison he had saved from the war, just in case. He swallowed it at midnight, died in our bed, alone, while I slept in the guest room. Caldwell felt something twist in his chest, not quite sympathy, not quite guilt, something more complicated. Frau Klein, I'm very sorry for your loss, but I still need you to come with us. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, where General Patton has arranged a tour. A tour. She repeated the word as if testing it, tasting it. Of what? You'll see when we get there. She stood, boothed her fur coat, checked her appearance in a mirror on the wall, applied more lipstick, fixed her hair, as if preparing for the opera, for a social event. Very well, Captain. I am ready. Take me to see what my husband died to hide from me. There was something in her voice. Resignation. Acceptance. But also something else. Something that sounded like the desire to understand. To know, even if the knowing destroyed her. Caldwell almost respected it. Almost. Third address, Conrad Bergman's apartment, Fourth floor walk-up, modest by comparison to the others. A lawyer's salary bought comfort but not luxury. Not in Weimar, where old money and academic prestige ruled. Bergman answered the door himself. He was already dressed. Suit, tie, polished shoes, as if he had been expecting them, as if he had been waiting. He was young, 28, handsome in a clean-cut way, war wound on his left hand, 2 fingers missing, artillery probably, or a grenade. He had seen combat, had survived, had come home. Captain Caldwell. Caldwell was surprised. You know my name? I saw the jeeps from my window. I knew you would come eventually. He grabbed his coat. I assume this is about the camp. Most Germans played dumb, claimed ignorance, acted shocked, but Bergman was different. You know about Buchenwald. Of course I know, everyone knows. We just don't talk about it. He stepped into the hallway, locked his door behind him. That's the German way. See everything, say nothing, pretend ignorance. He looked at Caldwell. His eyes were clear, honest, haunted. I'll come voluntarily, no need for force or theatrics. Why Toyota? Bergman smiled, sad, broken. Because I'm a coward, Captain. I saw things, I suspected things, I did nothing. And now I need to see what my cowardice allowed, what my silence enabled. He walked past Caldwell toward the stairs. Shall we go? I assume we're walking. 5 miles to the camp. I've walked it before, when I was assigned to transport duty. I saw the prisoners, saw them marching, saw how thin they were, how dead their eyes looked. He paused on the landing. I told myself they were just laborers, just workers, just criminals getting what they deserved. I told myself a lot of lies, Captain. Today, I suspect I will learn the truth. By 7:30, 1,000 citizens stood in the town square. The transformation was remarkable. Weimar's elite, all gathered in one place. They were dressed well. The women wore fur coats despite the spring warmth. Expensive furs, fox, mink, sable. The kind of coats that cost a year's wages for an ordinary worker. The men wore expensive suits and fedora hats. Wool, tailored, perfectly fitted. They carried themselves with dignity, with education, with the confidence of people who had never been told no. They were laughing, chatting, treating this like a social gathering, like a garden party or a museum opening. Clusters formed, social circles, professional networks, academic colleagues. They discussed the weather, the inconvenience, the rudeness of the Americans. My shoes will get dusty. This is outrageous. I have a lecture to deliver at 10. Someone should file a formal protest. They thought it was propaganda. They thought it was a show. They thought the Americans were exaggerating to justify the occupation, to demonize Germany, to excuse their own brutality. They had no idea. Caldwell watched them, these sophisticated people, these cultured people, these people who read philosophy and attended concerts and considered themselves the pinnacle of Western civilization. In a few hours, they would be broken. He felt no satisfaction in that knowledge, just a grim certainty that it was necessary. Patton arrived at 7:45. His jeep pulled into the square. He stood, scanned the crowd. 1,000 faces looked back. Curious, annoyed, superior. Patton didn't speak, didn't give a speech, didn't explain. He simply gestured. The march began. They walked out of Weimar in a column, 4 abreast, organized, military precision imposed on civilian chaos. MPs flanked them, not threatening, just present, ensuring no one left, no one escaped, no one turned back. Caldwell walked near the front. He watched the civilians. They were still talking, still smiling. Some were complaining about the inconvenience. A woman in a mink coat, this is absurd. I have a salon this afternoon. Important people are coming. Academics, artists. A man in a pinstriped suit. My clients will be furious. I have meetings, contracts to review. They thought this was temporary, a minor inconvenience, an hour or two, then back to their lives, back to normalcy. Patton walked beside the column, not in a jeep, on foot. He could have ridden, could have led from comfort, but he chose to walk, to share the burden, to ensure every eye could see him, could understand that this was his decision, his responsibility. His face showed nothing, but Caldwell noticed details. The tightness around Patton's eyes, the set of his jaw, the way his hand gripped his riding crop just a bit too tightly. The general was carrying weight, preparing for what was coming. The column moved through Weimar's outskirts, past the last houses, past the last shops, into the countryside. The road was good, paved, well-maintained. This was Germany. Infrastructure was a point of pride. After 30 minutes, someone started singing. A drinking song. Others joined in. They were treating this like a hike, a pleasant spring walk, an adventure to tell their grandchildren about. Remember when the Americans made us walk to that camp? Such a ridiculous show, but the weather was lovely. Caldwell felt sick. After 60 minutes, the mood began to change. Not dramatically, just subtle shifts. The singing stopped. Conversations became quieter. People began to notice the road they were on, the direction they were heading, toward Ettersburg Hill, toward the place they pretended didn't exist. A few faces showed recognition, understanding, fear. Bergman was one of them. He walked in silence, his face growing paler with each step. He knew where they were going. He had been there before, on transport duty, seeing but not seeing, knowing but not knowing. After 90 minutes, the wind changed. The smell hit them, like an invisible wall, like walking through a curtain into another world. The conversation stopped. The smiles disappeared. One woman pulled out a perfume scarf, tried to cover her nose, protect herself from the stench. An MP pulled it away, gently but firmly. "Keep moving, ma'am." But the smell, "keep moving." They walked on. The smell grew stronger, heavier, thicker. It coated their throats, invaded their lungs. There was no escaping it. Frau Klein stumbled. Caldwell caught her arm. She looked at him. Her makeup was starting to run, sweat and tears mixing. "What is that smell?" He didn't answer. She would know soon enough. Dr. Schneider's face had changed. The annoyed superiority was gone. In its place was something else. Dawning horror, recognition, understanding. He had smelled this before, for 8 years, every day, every time the wind blew from the east. He had told himself it was a factory, industrial processes, normal wartime operations. But he had known, deep down, he had known. The gate appeared ahead, iron, black. The words visible now, even from a distance. Jedem das Sein. The column slowed. People at the front stopped walking. Those behind pushed forward. Confusion. Growing panic. Why are we stopping? Where are we? I want to go back. But there was no going back. The MPs formed a cordon, a human wall, pushing forward, ensuring momentum. Patton stood at the gate. He waited until all 1,000 were assembled. Packed together, no escape, no exit. He looked at them. These people in their furs and suits, these cultured people, these educated people, these people who claimed they didn't know. His blue eyes swept across them, cold, judging, finding them wanting. Then he nodded to Caldwell. Caldwell opened the gate. The citizens of Weimar walked into Bokenwald, and everything changed. 40 miles away at Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force chaos reigned. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery stood in Eisenhower's office. His face was red, purple almost. His carefully cultivated British calm had evaporated completely. "This is outrageous. Patton has created a diplomatic catastrophe, forcing German civilians to tour concentration camps at gunpoint, without proper authorization, without coordination with Allied command. And now I hear he's brought the press." He slammed his hand on Eisenhower's desk. "The press, Dwight Reuters, Associated Press, Life magazine. This will be on the front page of every newspaper in the world by tomorrow." Eisenhower sat behind his desk. He looked tired, exhausted. He had been dealing with Montgomery for 3 hours, since dawn, since the first reports of Patton's operation had filtered back to Schaeff. The camps are real, Monty. The atrocities are documented. What Patton is doing, I don't dispute that the camps exist. I don't dispute German atrocities. But there are procedures, protocols, chain of command. We can't just have generals running around making policy decisions that affect post-war Germany. Montgomery leaned forward. "Do you have any idea what Churchill is going to say? What Parliament is going to say? We are trying to rebuild Germany as a bulwark against Soviet expansion. Humiliating their civilians undermines that entire strategy." "Rebuilding," Eisenhower's voice went cold. "Monty, the war isn't even over yet. We haven't defeated Japan. Berlin is still fighting. And you're worried about rebuilding. I'm worried about next year, about 5 years from now, about the political landscape of post-war Europe. Stalin is going to use this. He's going to point at American brutality, at forced marches and civilian trauma. He's going to say we're no better than the Nazis. That's absurd. We're documenting genocide. We're creating evidence. You're creating propaganda for our enemies. The phone rang. Eisenhower picked it up. Yes, a British accent, crisp, formal. General Eisenhower, I have Prime Minister Churchill on the line. He wishes to speak with you urgently about the Weimar situation. Eisenhower closed his eyes, took a breath, put him through. Click, static. Then Churchill's unmistakable voice. That growl that had rallied Britain through the Blitz, that had defied Hitler when all seemed lost, that had built the Allied coalition through sheer force of will and rhetoric. Now it was angry. Dwight, what in blazes is Patton doing, making Germans witness what they allowed Prime Minister? I understand the sentiment, Dwight, truly I do. The camps are an abomination, a stain on civilization. But this action creates diplomatic complications that extend far beyond moral satisfaction. Churchill paused. Eisenhower could hear him lighting a cigar, the familiar ritual. The Soviets will exploit this. They will point to American actions and claim moral equivalency. They will use it in negotiations, in the press, in every forum where East and West compete for hearts and minds. With respect, Prime Minister, I don't care what the Soviets think. Not about this. You should care. We are entering a new phase. The war against Germany is ending. The question of post-war Europe is beginning, and this action poisons that well. Montgomery was nodding vigorously, vindicated, justified. Eisenhower's jaw tightened. Prime Minister, in 50 years, no one will remember the diplomatic complications, but they will remember the evidence we created, or failed to create. That is a romantic notion, Dwight, but politics deals in the immediate, and immediately this creates problems. I'm aware of the problems, sir. Then stop it. Recall Patton. Issue a statement that this was unauthorized. Distance yourself. No. Silence on the line. Montgomery's face went white. I beg your pardon. No, Prime Minister. I will not stop Patton. I will not recall him. I will not distance myself from this action. Eisenhower stood, faced the window, looked out at nothing. Sir, I authorized this operation. I supported it. I am expanding it. I have ordered every available journalist and photographer to Buchenwald. I am personally visiting the site this afternoon. This is not Patton acting alone. This is Allied policy, American policy, my policy. Churchill's voice rose. Dwight, I am giving you a direct order as your political superior within the Allied command structure. With profound respect, Prime Minister, you are not my superior. You are an ally, a valued ally, a crucial ally, but General Marshall and President Truman are my chain of command, not Parliament, not Whitehall. He turned back to face Montgomery, looked him in the eye. This is an American operation in the American sector. Patton is my subordinate, and I am allowing him to proceed, more than allowing, supporting, endorsing. Churchill's voice came through the phone, carefully controlled now, dangerously quiet. Are you prepared to face the political consequences of this decision, General Eisenhower? Yes, sir, I am. Another pause. Longer. Eisenhower could hear background noise. Staff, advisors, the machinery of British government. Then surprisingly, Churchill laughed. That famous chuckle. Humorless but genuine. You Americans, always so bloody direct, so bloody certain. No nuance, no subtlety. Just, this is right, this is wrong. Full steam ahead. A sigh. Very well, do what you must. But document everything. If we're going to break every protocol in the book, if we're going to create a diplomatic incident of this magnitude, then by God, we're going to do it thoroughly. Make sure the record is complete. Make sure the evidence is indisputable. Yes, sir, that is exactly the plan. And Dwight, yes, Prime Minister. Tell Patton, Churchill paused, drew on his cigar. Tell him he's a magnificent bastard, even if he's going to cause me no end of headaches with Parliament and the Foreign Office. The line went dead. Eisenhower set the phone down slowly. He looked at Montgomery. The decision stands. Patton continues. In fact, I'm expanding the operation. I want congressional delegations there. Senators, representatives, members of Parliament, if they will come. I want this witnessed at the highest levels. Montgomery's voice was ice. This is a catastrophic mistake. You're choosing moral posturing over strategic thinking, sentiment over practicality. You're letting Patton's theatrics override sound policy. No, Monty. I'm choosing to document the truth while the evidence is fresh, while the witnesses are available, while the Germans can still be confronted with what they enabled. Eisenhower moved to his desk, sat down. In 50 years, maybe 100 people will try to deny this happened. They'll call it propaganda, exaggeration, allied lies to justify the war. And if we don't create overwhelming evidence now, if we don't force German witnesses to testify, then we give those deniers ammunition. He looked up at Montgomery. That's what this is about. Not revenge, not punishment. Evidence, truth, history. Montgomery's face was stone. You're wrong, and history will prove it. This action will complicate post-war reconstruction, will undermine German cooperation, will hand the Soviets a propaganda victory. He turned and walked toward the door, paused. When this backfires, when the consequences become clear, remember that I warned you. The door closed, not quite a slam, but close. Eisenhower sat alone. He picked up his phone. Get me General Patton, direct line, encrypted. At Buchenwald, the column had moved through the gate, 1,000 people. They walked through in silence. The first thing they saw was not the buildings, not the barbed wire, not the guard towers. They saw the prisoners, thousands of them, standing behind wire fences, silent, motionless, watching. These were not men, not in any recognizable sense. These were skeletons wrapped in skin. Striped uniforms hung on frames that weighed 80 pounds, 70, 60. Faces that were all bone and shadow, eyes that had seen too much, eyes that had gone past human. They didn't shout, didn't curse, didn't beg. They just stared, and that stare was more terrible than any scream. Schneider stopped walking, his mouth opened. No sound came out. He had spent 40 years studying philosophy, had written 3 books on ethics, had lectured on the categorical imperative, had taught that reason could perfect mankind, that education could eliminate barbarism. But there was no reason here. No perfection, no education, no humanity, just the stare of the dead who were still breathing. Frau Klein pulled her fur coat tighter, as if the expensive fabric could protect her from what she was seeing, as if wealth could insulate her from truth. It couldn't. The prisoners watched, silent, judging. These people in their furs and suits. These people who had lived a mile away, who had smelled the smoke, who had seen the trains, who had chosen comfort over action. The prisoners didn't need to speak. Their presence was accusation enough. Conrad Bergman stood frozen. He had been here before, on transport duty, but he had never really looked, had trained his eyes to slide past the prisoners, to not see, to not process, to not understand. Now he was being forced to look, to see, to process, to understand. His face went gray. Captain Caldwell watched them, watched the color drain from their faces, the confidence evaporate, the sophistication crumble like wet paper. Good, he thought. Let them see. Let them finally see what their silence bought. Patton stood at the front of the column. His back was straight, his face was expressionless, the mask firmly in place. But his riding crop was gripped so tightly the leather creaked. He didn't speak. He simply pointed. Forward, toward the main courtyard. The column moved like sleepwalkers, like people in a nightmare who couldn't wake up. The courtyard opened before them, and there in the center was the trailer. Simple, utilitarian, the kind used for hauling supplies, for moving equipment. But it wasn't hauling supplies now, it was hauling bodies, 237 of them, stacked like cordwood, naked, yellow-skinned, bones visible under papery flesh, arms and legs tangled together in death's final embrace. Faces frozen in expressions of agony, or relief, or nothing at all. Some were fresh, dead within hours. Their skins still retained some color, some moisture, some hint of the humanity they had possessed. Others were older, mummified by time and neglect. Leather stretched over skeleton, faces collapsed inward, bodies that weighed less than children. The pile was 6 feet high. A woman screamed, then another, then a dozen. Men turned away. Strong men, educated men, men who thought they understood the world, men who had attended university and read literature and considered themselves sophisticates. They turned away and vomited. Dr. Schneider fell to his knees, his hands pressed against his face. He was making a sound, a low keening, like an animal caught in a trap, like something breaking that had been whole. No, 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 this cannot be real. But it was real, undeniably, horrifically. Completely real. An American soldier stood beside the trailer, young, maybe 20. His face was hard beyond his years. He had seen this pile for 3 days now. The shock had worn off. All that remained was anger, cold, implacable, permanent. He looked at the German civilians, these people in their furs and suits, these people who claimed they didn't know, and he felt nothing but contempt. Finally, he thought, finally they see what we've been looking at. Caldwell moved through the crowd, physically pulling people to their feet when they collapsed, turning their faces toward the pile when they tried to look away. Look at it, he said. His voice was quiet, deadly. You've ignored it for 8 years. You can look at it for 5 minutes. A well-dressed man in a fedora hat grabbed Caldwell's arm, desperate, pleading. I didn't know. We didn't know this was happening. We believed. The government said they were just labor camps. Caldwell shook him off, not roughly, but firmly. You knew. You smelled it every single day. You saw the smoke. You saw the prisoners at the railway station. You knew. The man stumbled back. His face crumbled. Because Caldwell was right. Deep down beneath all the rationalizations and justifications and convenient lies they had all known. Patton walked to the trailer. He stood before it. He had seen these bodies 3 days ago. Had hoped that familiarity would dull the horror. That repeated exposure would create distance. It hadn't. He turned to face the German civilians. His voice cut through the crying and vomiting. This is what you claimed you didn't know about. This is the smoke you said was from a factory. These are the people you said were volunteers, workers, criminals getting what they deserved. He gestured to the pile, each word precise, controlled, deadly. Look at them. Look. These were human beings. They had names, families, lives, hopes, you had dreams, and you let them be murdered. While you went to concerts, while you drank coffee, while you discussed philosophy. Frau Klein was bent over. Her fur coat touched the mud. Her makeup ran in black streaks down her face. All pretense of sophistication gone. We couldn't have known it was this bad. Patton walked to her, stood over her. His shadow fell across her bent form. You didn't want to know. That's not the same thing as not knowing. You chose comfort over truth, convenience over action, your own peace of mind over their lives. His voice dropped, became almost gentle, almost sad. And now you have to live with that choice. A prisoner approached, slowly, carefully, his body moving as if each step required conscious effort, as if the act of walking was almost beyond his capacity. He was 35 years old. He looked 70. He weighed 82 pounds. His striped uniform hung on him like a tent. His face was all angles and hollows, cheekbones sharp as knives, eyes sunken deep in their sockets. But those eyes were alive, burning, focused with terrible intensity. He walked directly to Dr. Schneider. The professor was still on his knees, still making that keening sound, still trying to hide his face from what he was seeing. The prisoner stopped in front of him, stood there, waiting. Finally, Schneider looked up. Tears and mud streaked his face. His eyes were red, broken. The prisoner spoke in German. His voice was rough, damaged, but clear, each word carefully articulated. Ich kenn dich. I know you. Schneider's face went blank. Then recognition flickered. Fear. Understanding. Was I know you, and the prisoner repeated in German, then switched to English for the Americans present. My name is Jakob Stein. I was an engineer. I lived on Marienstrasse, number 42. Schneider's mouth worked. No sound came. Jakob continued, his voice flat, dead, as if he were reciting facts. Mathematical equations, things without emotion. You lived on Marienstrasse, number 38, 4 doors down. You were my neighbor for 6 years. The professor's mouth worked silently. I had a wife, Anna. She was beautiful. She played piano, Chopin mostly. You used to hear her practicing through the walls. You told me once that it was lovely, that she had real talent. Jacob's voice didn't change. Still flat, still dead. I had a daughter, Rebecca. She was 6 years old. She had dark curls like her mother. She liked to play in the garden. You used to smile at her when you walked past. You gave her candy once, at Christmas. Schneider was shaking his head. No, I don't remember. Yes, you do. November 1938. Crystal knocked. They came for us, broke our windows, dragged us into the street, beat my father. He was 73. They beat him until he stopped moving. The courtyard had gone completely silent. Everyone was listening, Germans, Americans. Even the other prisoners had moved closer, bearing witness to this witnessing. You were in your house. I saw you. At the window, looking out. I was on the ground, bleeding. They had guns pointed at my family. And I looked up. I looked right at you. Jacob leaned down, put his skeletal face close to Schneider's. I begged, not with words. The SS would have shot me, but with my eyes. I begged you to help, to call someone, to do anything. His voice was barely a whisper now. You closed your curtains. Schneider made a sound, not quite a word, not quite a scream. Something primal, something breaking. They took us to prison, beat us more. My father died there, then they released me. Warning, no more trouble, stay quiet. Understand? Jacob straightened slightly. I understood. I stayed quiet. Hoped that was the end. But in 1941 they came again. For Anna, for Rebecca. Put them on trains. I tried to follow. They beat me, threw me in a cell, eventually brought me here. His voice was still flat, but there was something underneath now, something terrible. Anna and Rebecca went east, to the camps there. They never came back. I asked every prisoner who came from those camps. No one saw them. No one knew them. They disappeared like smoke. He pulled something from his pocket, small, worn, a piece of cloth. Anna embroidered this in 1938, before they came for us. She stitched our names, hers, Rebecca's. I hid it in my coat lining when they arrested me. Carried it through 3 years in this place. He held it out. Schneider could see the delicate embroidery. Anna Stein. Rebecca Stein, age 6. This is all I have left of them. Jacob's eyes locked on Schneider's. But you saw those trains. You heard the screams. You smelled the smoke from camps like this one. And every time you closed your curtains, you closed your eyes. You closed your heart. Schneider collapsed completely. He fell forward into the mud. His body shook with sobs. Broken, destroyed. Everything he thought he was torn away. Everything he believed about himself revealed as lies. Jacob didn't move, didn't show satisfaction, didn't show anything. He had gone past emotion, past revenge, past hatred even. All that remained was the need to speak truth, to testify, to ensure his family was not forgotten. Captain Caldwell watched this exchange. Something tightened in his chest. Not quite satisfaction. Not quite sorrow. Something more complex. Something that had no name but felt like witnessing something important. Something necessary. Something that would echo through history. Patton stood motionless. His face betrayed nothing. The mask perfect. Complete. But his knuckles were white on the riding crop. And if you looked very closely, you could see it. The slight tremor in his jaw. The muscle jumping in his cheek. He felt it too. The weight of this moment. The terrible necessity of it. Jacob stepped back from Schneider. Looked at Patton. Nodded once. Acknowledgement. Understanding. Then he turned and walked away. Back into the crowd of prisoners. Disappearing like a ghost. But his words remained. Hanging in the air like smoke. Like accusation. Like truth that could never be unsaid. Patton let the silence stretch. Let the Germans sit with what they had heard. What they had seen. What they could no longer deny. Then he gestured forward. Toward the pathology building. We're not done. Keep moving. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, April 16th, 1945. The column descended the hill in silence. 1,000 people walked back toward Weimar. But they were not the same people who had climbed that morning. Those people, confident, cultured, sophisticated, no longer existed. These were ghosts, hollow shells, people broken in ways that could never be repaired. No one spoke. No one laughed. No one complained. They just walked. Frau Margareta Klein's fur coat dragged in the mud. She didn't notice. Her makeup had run in black rivers down her face. She didn't care. The woman who had hosted salons and organized festivals was gone. Something else inhabited her body now. Something that had seen too much. Dr. Wilhelm Schneider walked with his head down. His expensive suit was soiled with mud and vomit. Every few steps he would mouth words. The same words. I closed my curtains. I closed my curtains. A mantra of guilt. A confession to the sky itself. Conrad Bergman walked alone. The other civilians avoided him. Perhaps because he had admitted the truth first. Perhaps because his honesty reminded them of their own complicity. He didn't care anymore. Social acceptance meant nothing when you had seen what they had seen. Captain Caldwell walked alongside the column. He watched them. These broken people. Part of him felt they deserved this. They had been forced to see, forced to know, forced to own their silence. But another part carried weight. He had helped do this to them, had helped break them. That wasn't something you could dismiss, wasn't something you could forget. Patton rode in his Jeep at the rear. He could have led, could have ridden ahead, but he chose to follow, to watch, to ensure every single person completed the march. His face showed nothing, but his jaw was set. His hands gripped the Jeep's frame with white knuckles. The general was carrying weight, heavy weight that would never leave him. They reached Weimar at 4 o'clock. The column dispersed in the town square. People stumbled away to their homes. No one said goodbye. No one looked at each other. They simply scattered, fleeing, trying to escape what they could never escape. Within 10 minutes, the square was empty. That night, the city held its breath. In his villa, Dr. Wilhelm Schneider sat at his desk. He had tried to read Kant, Hegel, the philosophers who had shaped his life, the books that had given him purpose, meaning, a sense that reason could perfect the world. But the words were ash, meaningless marks on paper, abstractions that had nothing to do with reality, with ovens, with ashes, with 6-year-old girls who loved to play in gardens. He opened a drawer. Inside was a pistol, his father's, from the Great War. He loaded it with steady hands. No trembling now. This was the first clear decision he had made in years. Then he took paper, began to write. To Jakob Stein, if you still live, I am sorry. These words mean nothing. I know that, but I must say them anyway. I saw your family being taken. I heard Anna's screams. I saw Rebecca's frightened face, and I closed my curtains. I chose comfort over courage, my safety over their lives. There is no forgiveness for this. I do not ask for it. I only acknowledge the truth. I cannot live with that truth. He signed it, Dr. Wilhelm Schneider, professor of philosophy. Then he put the pistol to his temple. The shot echoed through the quiet villa. Across the city, Frau Margareta Klein sat in her empty mansion. Her husband was dead, 2 days in the ground. She understood why now. He had known what the Americans would find, had known she would be forced to witness, and he had chosen to escape before that day came. She didn't blame him anymore. She envied him. She looked at the bottle of sleeping pills on her nightstand. The doctor had prescribed them months ago. She poured them into her hand, counted. 23. She filled a glass with water, began to swallow. 1, 2, 3, bang, and at 9 she stopped. Not from courage, not from hope, from something else, something she couldn't name. She thought of Jakob Stein, of Anna and Rebecca, of all the others whose names she would never know. She couldn't bring them back, but maybe she could help those who remained. The survivors who would need aid, shelter, support. It wasn't redemption. She didn't deserve redemption. It wasn't forgiveness. She had no right to forgiveness. But it was something. She put the remaining pills back, stood, walked to her late husband's study, found his ledgers, the records of their wealth, property, investments, counts. Tomorrow she would begin, converting wealth into aid, privilege into service, guilt into action. She would live. Not because she wanted to, but because dying would be one final act of cowardice. And she had been a coward long enough. Conrad Bergman sat in his apartment with pen and paper. He wasn't thinking about death. He was thinking about responsibility, about law, about the precise documentation of guilt. He was a lawyer. He understood culpability. And he understood that what he had done, what he had failed to do, made him complicit. He began to write a confession, a legal document. I, Conrad Bergman, attorney at law, hereby confess to the following crimes. He wrote for 3 hours. Every incident he remembered, every time he had seen Jewish families removed, every rumor he had heard and dismissed, every moment when he could have acted and didn't. 47 specific instances, 47 families, 47 moments of chosen silence. He documented them all with legal precision. When he finished 12 pages, single-spaced, detailed, complete, he signed it, dated it, notarized it with his own stamp. Then he picked up the phone, called the American Military Police. This is Conrad Bergman. I wish to turn myself in for war crimes. At midnight, Caldwell delivered the casualty report to Patton. 9 suicides, confirmed. Schneider, 3 other professors, 2 lawyers, 1 doctor, 2 businessmen's wives. All had left notes. All cited the same reason. They could not live with what they had seen, what they had allowed. Patton read the report. His face was stone. Bury them quietly, mark the graves. Yes, sir. Caldwell hesitated. Sir, do you think it was worth it, 9 dead? Patton looked up. His eyes were hard, but there was something beneath the hardness, something that looked like pain. Captain 6 million are dead because people looked away. 9 more faced the truth and couldn't survive it. He paused. That's not my failure, that's theirs. But sir, Bum, they had 8 years to act. Any moment, any day, they chose comfort. They chose ignorance. His voice softened slightly. I gave them truth. What they did with it was their choice. Caldwell wanted to accept that, but he saw through the general's mask. Sir, off the record. Off the record. Did you want this to happen? Patton's mask cracked just for a second. No, barely audible. I wanted them to live with it, to carry that weight, to tell their children, to make sure it never happens again. He looked at his hands. But some people can't carry truth. It crushes them. I understand that now. He stood, walked to the window. Dismiss that, Captain. Caldwell left. Patton sat alone, opened his diary, wrote, April 16, 1945. 9 of them couldn't survive the truth. I tell myself this was necessary, that the alternative 6 million forgotten is worse, but I will carry their faces, every one. This is my burden, my choice, my responsibility. He closed the book, sat in darkness. Outside, Weimar slept, but it would never sleep peacefully again. April 17, 1945, 10 o'clock in the morning. General Dwight D. Eisenhower's staff car pulled up to Buchenwald's gates. The Supreme Commander stepped out. Dressed simply, no ceremony. This was personal. Patton waited. They saluted, shook hands. George? Ike. Show me. They walked through the gate together. Eisenhower saw the prisoners, thousands of skeletal men, standing, watching, silent. He stopped. His face went pale. My God. That's everyone's reaction, Patton said quietly. It gets worse. They walked to the courtyard, to the trailer with the bodies. Eisenhower looked at the pile. 30 seconds. Not moving, not speaking. Then he turned away, walked 20 feet, vomited. Patton waited. He had done the same. He understood. When Eisenhower straightened, his face was gray. How many? On that trailer, 237. Total in the camp. We're still counting, tens of thousands. Jesus Christ. They continued. The barracks, the pathology lab, the crematorium. At each stop, Eisenhower's face grew harder, more determined. Finally, standing in the crematorium, he spoke. I want every reporter in Europe here, every photographer, every congressman, every senator. I want this documented so thoroughly that denial becomes impossible. Now, today. Eisenhower turned to Patton. You were right, George, about all of it. We need German witnesses. We need this evidence. He paused. I should have trusted your instincts from the beginning. Before they left, Eisenhower spoke again. George, I need to tell you something. I've been jealous of you. For years. Patton was surprised. Jealous. You see things I don't see. You make decisions in seconds that are better than mine in hours. You understand what matters. Eisenhower looked back at the camp. I would never have done this. I would have worried about politics, about offending people. You didn't care about any of that. You did what was right. He climbed into his car. When this war is written about, the moral courage will be yours, always yours. The car drove away. Patton stood at the gate. Processing. Caldwell approached. Sir, the Supreme Commander just admitted he was jealous of me. I don't know whether to feel honored or sad. Why sad, sir? Because it means this decision was harder than I thought, if even Ike couldn't make it. April 19th, 25th, 1945. The press descended. Over 200 reporters, photographers, correspondents, Edward R. Murrow, Walter Cronkite, Ernie Pyle. They walked through Buchenwald, saw everything, documented everything, thousands of photographs, hours of film, pages of testimony. Eisenhower personally toured congressional delegations, members of parliament, anyone with influence. His message was always the same. See this, remember this, because someday someone will try to say it never happened. For 3 weeks, German civilians walked through Buchenwald. Thousands more. Forced witnessing. Mandatory truth. Some broke, some killed themselves. Most carried the weight, but all of them saw, and seeing could never claim ignorance again. April 25th, 1945, Patton and Caldwell sat in the mayor's office. The documentation was complete. The work was done. Serge, was it worth it? Patton was silent for a long time. In 50 years, people will say the Holocaust never happened. They'll call it propaganda. He stood, walked to the window. But German witnesses, Germans who saw, who admitted complicity, that's different. Those who killed themselves chose death over truth. I can live with that. What I couldn't live with is 6 million forgotten. A knock at the door. Enter. A soldier. General, there's someone to see you, Jacob Stein. Send him in. Jacob entered, still skeletal, still damaged, but something in his eyes had changed, something that looked almost like peace. General Patton. Mr. Stein, please sit. Jacob sat carefully. I came to thank you for making them see, for ensuring my family won't be forgotten. He pulled out the embroidered cloth. My wife made this in 1938. Before they took us, I hid it in my coat lining, carried it through 3 years here. He held it out. Anna Stein, Rebecca Stein, age 6. I want you to have it. Patton drew back. I can't. This is all you have. Please, you made sure they'll be remembered. This is gratitude. This is trust. Patton took the cloth, held it carefully. I will keep this, and I will remember them. I promise. They shook hands. Jacob left. Patton sat holding the embroidered cloth, looking at the names. Caldwell saw something he'd never seen before. A single tear on George S. Patton's face. Sir. It's all right, Captain. Some of things deserve tears. He folded the cloth carefully, put it in his breast pocket, over his heart. I'll carry this for the rest of my life. December 9th, 1945. 8 months later. The war was over. Germany defeated. Japan surrendered. Peace had come. George S. Patton was driving from Mannheim to Heidelberg. A routine trip. At 11:45, the car collided with a truck. Not violent, just an accident. But Patton hit his head. His neck snapped, paralyzed from the neck down. They took him to Heidelberg Hospital. The doctors worked, but the damage was catastrophic. Patton lay in bed, conscious, aware, unable to move. He knew what this meant. Caldwell was there, by his bedside. Bob. Sir? In my breast pocket, the cloth, take it. Caldwell carefully removed the handkerchief. Anna Stein, Rebecca Stein. Give it to Ike. Tell him to remember. That was the point of everything. Yes, sir. I don't regret Buchenwald. Not the forced march, not even the 9 who couldn't bear it. It had to be done. The only regret is not doing it sooner. 12 days later, December 21st, 1945, George S. Patton died. The call came to Eisenhower at 2 in the morning. General Eisenhower, General Patton is gone. Eisenhower sat in silence. 45 seconds. Thank you. He canceled all meetings, flew to Germany, to the funeral. December 24th, 1945, Christmas Eve, Luxembourg American Cemetery. Rain fell. Thousands attended. Eisenhower stood beside the flag-draped coffin. His face was stone. His hands gripped Patton's riding crop until his knuckles were white. He didn't speak at the funeral. Couldn't. Not without breaking. They lowered the coffin, among his soldiers, where Patton had wanted to be. After the crowds left, Eisenhower remained, alone by the grave, rain soaking his uniform. George, he spoke to the earth, 37 years. We served together for 37 years, and I never told you what you meant. His voice broke. You were the best battlefield commander America ever produced. You saw things I couldn't see. You did things I couldn't do. He knelt, put his hand on the wet earth. Buchenwald, that was you. I would never have had the courage. He pulled out the embroidered cloth. Anna Stein, Rebecca Stein, you carried them with you. You made the world remember them. Rain mixed with tears. I thought we had time. After the war. I thought I'd tell you what you meant. How much I valued you. How much I needed you. But we ran out of time, and now these words come too late. He placed the cloth on the grave, stood, saluted, then walked away through the rain. Behind him, George S. Patton rested among his soldiers. The embroidered cloth lay on the grave. Anna Stein, Rebecca Stein, age 6, remembered, forever. 30 years later, Thornton Caldwell, 79 years old, wrote one paragraph in his memoir, General Patton taught me this. Tell people what they mean to you. Not tomorrow, now, because Eisenhower never told Patton, and that regret killed him slower than any bullet could. Don't wait for the funeral. Say it today, say it now, because tomorrow might be too late. Modern day, Buchenwald Memorial. Tourists walk the grounds, see the barracks, The crematorium, the monuments, they see a plaque, added in 1985. Forced march of April 16, 1945, ordered by General George S. Patton, Jr. 1,000 German witnesses, 9 who could not bear the truth, 6,000 who must never be forgotten, never forget, never again. Below that, in memory of Anna Stein and Rebecca Stein, age 6, and all those who died unnamed. Below the names, one final line. Because one man refused to let us look away. The sun sets over Buchenwald. Shadows lengthen. Tourists leave. But the memory remains, preserved, protected, witnessed, because George S. Patton forced truth into light, because he carried strangers' names over his heart, because he understood that some things must be seen to be believed, and believed to be prevented. Anna Stein, Rebecca Stein, 6 million others, remembered forever.